What an incredible special music. Thank you very much. Good morning. It's an honor to be here at Tabernacle SDA Church. This is my third time visiting you. They say the third time is a charm, and I'm certainly hoping that's the case. As you can see, my name is Pritham Raj. I am a physician. I am an internist and psychiatrist. That's simply code for I deal with matters of the body and the mind. I try to meld the two together in my practice, and that is kind of my specialty. And I've been cruising by your church for the last, 16 years since I moved to Oregon. I bring you greetings from the Pleasant Valley Church, where I'm a member. And I know Pastor Phillips was instrumental in working with Pastor Macy, so I thank her. I know she's not here today, but I know she was kind to give me the pulpit today. And we had a very rich Sabbath school discussion this morning that's going to center around a lot of what I'm actually going to talk about, because anxiety is upon us, is it not? Are we living in anxious times? Strange, challenging times? So I spend a lot of my time walking through some of these issues with people. Have any of you heard me speak, by the way, at camp meeting? None. Okay, I spoke about 3 or 4 years ago before the pandemic, so not this last one. But if you were at anybody at camp meeting this year? Okay, several of you. So if you were there, you might have, I'm hoping, do I need to point this down there to advance? It is on. There it is. Did that work? Or was that you? That was me? Great. Okay. So if you were at the tent where some of the booths were set up, this is my nonprofit organization. We're called Dark to Light, and I've put several of these brochures. DARK is an acronym standing for Divorce Adjustment and Recovery for Kids. Sadly, I went through the process many years ago, and my kids, I asked them, hey, how can we help other families going through this difficult time? And this was actually originated in our car one day. They said, why don't we help the kids of families? Because we sadly know, and I'll share some of the divorce statistics, it's pretty high, and we know that what gets lost in the shuffle is often the kids. And so that's what our ministry focuses on. And again, we have several brochures in the back if you want to take a look at that. And we were also at camp meeting. That's how we met some of the folks connected with this church. And so that's why I'm here. Another disclosure, you may see me on TV. You can say, hey, I know that guy. I am the chief medical officer of a company that does transcranial magnetic stimulation. And we've run a lot of ads, and I've been on all the morning talk shows. And we talk about using this magnetic device to actually treat depression. It's a non-medication treatment option. And so that's what I spend 70% of my time doing. And the other 30% I'm teaching up at the university. Mainly in internal medicine. So that's a little bit of my background so you can know, why is this guy spending a lot of time on health? This is what I do for a living. But we're going to bring it back to what is, I think, most germane to us as Christians, because what does the Christian journey look like to us in 2022? It's a straight and narrow path that we're following as Christians. And are there challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis that are different than other people? I think there are a lot of the same challenges. It's how we relate to them and how we use the cross to help us guide us day to day. And I wanted to start with some of the drivers of anxiety that we're facing today. How many of you are struggling with the ongoing pandemic? Is that still a driver for anxiety, or are we over that mostly? Oh, we got some hands. So not as many people are over it, it sounds like. Can I sell you on monkeypox? Anybody worried about monkeypox? So we haven't seen, for any of you scientists out there, when was the last time we as a nation saw, actually as a world, I should say, not as a nation, but as a world, saw smallpox? Any guesses? Oh no, it's later than that. 1980, that's when the CDC recognized that we've eradicated smallpox. But guess what? We're using smallpox vaccines to treat monkeypox. So what is old has become new again. What about economics? Can I sell you on anybody anxious about the economy? Okay, a couple more hands. Less people were worried about the pandemic. More are starting to worry about the economy. So it's interesting. Anxiety as it relates to finances, this has been studied by researchers at both Princeton and Purdue universities. What would you guess would be the ideal income so that anxiety becomes less of an issue for you? I want you to think to yourselves, and then we'll play Price is Right maybe. Do we have some numbers? 100,000. You're almost right on the nail on the head. $95,000 in this day and age is thought for a single person. For a single person. And if you want to take a family of 4, say, you multiply that by the square root of whatever your household is. So a family of 4, the square root of 4 is 2. So multiply that. If for a family of 4, it's $210,000. Because up to that point, for a family of 4, you're worried about certain things related to finances. But if you get beyond that, there are different sets of worries that go into that. So it's a sweet spot in research. Okay, you make too much, you're more anxious because you've got to protect your stuff. And if you make too less, then you're worrying about, hey, am I going to be able to pay the mortgage or the rent, etc. Is that an anxiety driver? I'm seeing heads nod if hands aren't going up. We talked in Sabbath school this morning about the homeless crisis and all of the factors involved there. And certainly it relates to some of the economic drivers. I just told you that the sweet spot in the economy is $95,000 for an individual. There is the housing affordability in Portland is a challenge, and it's driving some of the homeless situation. But the other piece of it too, which we touched on in Sabbath school, what percent of our population in Oregon, not the world, just in Oregon, struggles with substance use disorders? Any guesses? 20%. Okay, that's a little bit high. It's a little bit high, but it's about 10%, so 9% exactly. But that's 1 in 10 Oregonians in 2022 struggled with a substance use disorder? That's a lot of people. Nearly 10% of our population, and that's what a lot of times is a driver, not the only driver, but a driver, along with, again, affordable housing, etc., that is driving anxiety. Anybody anxious when they drive downtown these days? Okay, now I see the heads nodding. All right, yeah. It's a different place than when I moved here in 2006, I will tell you that. It's been sad to see, but also it makes me say, what can I do to be part of the solution? What things can I do to change this trajectory? And that's the way I want us to start to think as Christians, followers of the way. What Christ wouldn't have turned his back on people like that, right? And I've loved to hearing that you all are doing a homeless ministry. Is that still going on right now, or is that a thing of the past? In the past? Okay. Maybe it's time to revive it. Political. I don't want to get political on the pulpit, but we know that it's a challenging situation. It feels like, if we're not going towards civil war, it feels like at least the media is pitting people against each other all the time, which is why I tell my patients who get anxious about politics and the political situation, turn it off. Remove the stressor. Sometimes we don't think about that, but I check the headlines in the morning, but I don't want to spend too much time because I think the media, they're incentivized to show you all the graphic details of who is angry at who and who's pitted against who. So turn it off. Just spare yourself some of that and just dose yourself appropriately when it comes to politics, I think. And when it comes to spirituality, anybody anxious about how God is increasingly disappearing from the town square? Okay, some more hands there. That's a picture of Prague. Elizabeth and I had a chance to visit Prague right before the pandemic, and in this square, this is Old Town, Prague, there's this huge monolithic statue of Martin Luther. But you look at Europe in general, Europe God is missing in a lot of the places. They have these beautiful churches, and nobody's in them. It's kind of interesting that way. But is America becoming similar to Europe in that way? Because let's look at a couple of statistics. It's hard to see, I know, from the back there, but I'll try to walk you through this. This is Pew Research. Christianity, this was founded as a Christian nation, and over the past decade, just the past decade, we have gone from 77% of people or so saying that they believe in Christianity, or they at least ally themselves with Christianity. It dropped by 10% in a decade. Whereas religiously unaffiliated fill that void. It increased from 16% to 26%. So over a quarter of our population don't believe in any form of God or higher power or any of that, but Christianity has also diminished during that time. So we are on very interesting grounds as we go decade to decade. I would hate to see what this looks like in 30 years, right? And, this date will be very familiar to most Adventists. 1844 was the Great Disappointment happened, right? The Millerite movement, and it ushered in the age of Adventism. But Karl Marx that was the same year he's issuing this statement. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature. It is the opium of the people. Religion is selling. Don't worry about this life. We're focused on the next. And he thought that was misguided, which is always interesting, and that has been the tenor of what we're seeing in society today, driving anxieties. We're studying Mere Christianity right now in our Sabbath school, and I've learned so much from C.S. Lewis. He's just so brilliant, and one of his quotes, I think, rings true on what's happening today. But it's not something that's new. It's been happening for decades, if not centuries. What Satan put into the heads of our remote ancestors was the idea that they could be like gods, could set up on their own as if they had created themselves, be their own masters, invent some sort of happiness for themselves outside God, apart from God. And out of that hopeless attempt has come nearly all that we call human history: money, poverty, ambition, war, prostitution, classes, empire, slavery, the long, terrible story of man trying to find something other than God which will make him happy. Is that interesting? We've been striving on our own, not realizing what source we have readily at our disposal. And familial. We've talked just briefly about the divorce statistics, and everybody kind of knows that 50% of divorces marriages end in divorce, and about 4 to 5 million marriages happen each year. It's something we've kind of become accustomed to in some ways, but we're only the 12th leading country in the world in terms of divorce rates. The number one, anybody know this fact? Number one country where divorce is common. UK is close. It's a country that's very small. It's a tiny island nation called the Maldives. The Maldives has the highest, it set the Guinness Book of World Records for the number of divorces. On average, the statistic is women by the age of 30 have been married and divorced 3 times. 3 times. Can you believe that? And what does that do to the family unit and the dynamics? The kids are kind of like, who's coming, who's going, right? And that's kind of what's happening, and I think that's what's also driving families. We're seeing so many other sequela of that phenomenon. The least divorced nation in the world, ironically, is its neighbor, Sri Lanka. Now, there are many factors for that. This is the Indian Ocean, and you see the Maldives way out here. India is right here. Sri Lanka has the lowest rate of divorce. A lot of that is attributable to women's rights and things of that nature. They're not allowed to go off on their own. So there are many drivers to that. But culturally, I thought it was very interesting that the most divorced, the least divorced are right next to each other. Politics driving some of this. So turning then to our text that was so beautifully read. When I first read Matthew 6:34, it said to me, maybe let's read it together. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And I use the ESV because it uses the word anxiety rather than the NIV. So when I read this, I said, do not be anxious. But anxiety is part of life, isn't it, God? Right? We deal with anxieties. It's saying, do not be anxious. When I give this lecture on anxiety, I usually start with this inverted U-shaped curve, because I usually tell my students, and all of us remember being in the testing environment where we had to study for tests. If we didn't have a little bit of test anxiety, what would happen? We'd fail our exams, right? So anxiety in that situation is very helpful. It gets us to open up our books. It gets us to spend time studying. If I hadn't prepared for this sermon, you'd get a couple of slides thrown together and I'd be winging it. But I said, hey, I'm a little anxious. I don't know what the Holy Spirit wants me to say to Tabernacle, so I spent some time praying about it, thinking about what I could say to maybe touch some of you in ways that you haven't heard before when it comes to this subject of anxiety. So there is the right amount of anxiety, but beyond that, that's when things can get destructive, where when too much anxiety happens, that's when performance falls off. Okay? That is when kids get so anxious and wound up about a test that they fail their SAT or just do terribly on it, right? That's the kind of stress that we want to avoid and keep people on the top part of this curve. And this is based on research by the Yerkes-Dotson. This is a curve that is well known in mental health, where arousal, as it goes up, there's this kind of bell-shaped curve where there's optimal performance between both arousal and performance level, because if we get beyond that, that's when it becomes impaired. The performance becomes impaired, anxiety is too much, we've got to work towards getting people back to the top of the bell shape. But I reread this, and I don't think what God is saying in this is Jesus speaking through Matthew here. Therefore, do not be anxious. It doesn't say just do not be anxious. It says specifically about tomorrow. For tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. This may sound like I'm advocating for procrastination, right? Because I saw a recent meme saying, I love to procrastinate because I always have something to do tomorrow and nothing to do today, right? That's the art of procrastination. I always have something to do tomorrow, but I don't have to do it today. We want to avoid kind of that mentality as part of this, so we have to put it into context. So we have to look at what Matthew 6:33 says as a preamble. But seek first the what? Kingdom of God and His righteousness. Not necessarily our own thoughts on the matter. So self-psychology has become a big thing of like turning inward to look for answers within ourselves. But what is the counsel here? Seek the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you, right? And so that's kind of a playbook on how we can capture, in this case, God as our source behind anxiety reduction. Because, so I learned back in philosophy classes in college, to know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. So again, it's important, I think, to know ourselves, but that is only the beginning, is the Socratic saying, the beginning. It also involves, I think, a connection to something outside of ourselves for answers. But what about this seeking happiness? We've talked about happiness a couple of times. Isn't it important to be happy? Okay, so I'm hearing some tepid yeses. Yeah. Happiness, maybe. All right. Interestingly, I like this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who says, the purpose of life is not to be happy. It's to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make a difference that you have lived and lived well. So I don't think there's anything wrong with seeking happiness, but in context, it's not the only thing, because otherwise I think we'll be misguided in how we approach life. It is to be useful. And one of the books that's changed my life, anybody know this book by John Piper, Don't Waste Your Life? Anybody familiar with it? I would suggest you pick it up because it really has impacted. George Gaynor was the one who shared this with me. He was a senior pastor at Pleasant Valley. And I went through this book. And in psychiatry and in psychology, what do we tell people when they're struggling? Do we want them to take things weeks at a time? Months at a time? No, we tell them to stay in the moment and take things one step at a time. One step at a time. And that's what this book has guided me to do in my own life is, hey, how do we capture utility and usefulness one moment at a time? How can I make the most out of this moment? And so this hangs actually on my wall. This is pulled from this book. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Food for thought. Food for thought. So the best analogy I have, I took a class in college. It was kind of outside my major just to give myself some relief because I was a biology major at Johns Hopkins, and I took a film class on musicals. And one of the musicals that I spent time looking into really is, I think, the perfect analogy for what it means to be a Christian spending time where life throws all kinds of worries our way, it rains on us, rains on our parade all the time. And this is really what we as Christians should probably learn to do is sing and dance in the rain. I think that's these are the downspout of anxiety right on his head, and he's smiling through it, right? That's the attitude we want to start to take. So when I did a version of this at a camp meeting, I'm working on a book right now called 40 Days of Healing, a practical guide to a better life. And I drew 7 elements out of that, kind of taking off of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. And I won't have a chance to go into all 7 because of time today. We're running short. So I boiled it down. Instead of eat, pray, love, I went with pray, walk, breathe, because I want to give you 3 tools to think about through the week as you face your anxieties day to day. And I start with prayer because I think it's the best place to start. It's how I start my day, every day, is spending time in the Word and with God. For it says, this is Paul's letter to the Philippians, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So when you start your day with that kind of a positive tone, where you're saying, thank you, God, thank you for life, thank you for bringing me to Tabernacle SDA Church, it's gonna show in everything you do, right? And starting your day with that formula, I think, cannot be underemphasized. This is a rhetorical question. I'm not going to ask you to show of hands of how many times a day do you pray? No, I'm not going to do that. But I did want to learn from our Muslim brothers and sisters, how many times a day do they pray? Any guesses? I'm seeing the right, exactly. Hey, you got it right, 5 times a day. And their philosophy is, can someone who bathes 5 times a day get dirty? Pretty interesting philosophy. Yes? Okay. But that's their background behind their prayer emphasis. Okay? So I want to take you through real quickly the science of prayer. Because has it actually been shown to impact medical outcomes? Yes, it has. And I teach my residents and my fellows and my students all about something we call evidence-based medicine. It's not my best idea, my best guesses on medical outcomes. I want to teach them what has been scientifically proven in the most rigorous manner. Right? That's what I want them to take from my teaching. And that's what I'm going to share with you all today, is the best evidence that we have. And so one of my colleagues at Duke, his name is Mitch Krukoff, he's a cardiologist. And he wanted to look at this. He wanted to study what we call noetic interventions. It's part of this mantra study. Noetic simply means a healing influence performed without the use of drugs, devices, or surgical procedures. And he boiled it down to 4 things: stress, relaxation, imagery, which is a gentle relaxation technique as well, touch therapy, there's great power in healing touch, as well as prayer. Okay, he looked at those for patients who were undergoing cardiac procedures, either angioplasty, which is putting a balloon in and opening up blocked vessels, stenting, or open heart surgery. Because he wanted to see what would happen as a result of this. And he found a 25 to 30% reduction in adverse outcomes such as death, heart failure, post-procedural ischemia, repeat angioplasty, or heart attacks, anything involving more work that needed to be done than those who didn't have those 4. And of the 4 noetic therapies he studied, off-site prayer was found to be the most impactful of all. What did off-site prayer look like? Does our God hear prayers from Muslims? Yeah. Does God hear Jewish prayers? Not just Adventist prayers? What? That's what this study showed. It was beautiful. They had a Unity School of Christianity where they did this 24-hour vigil in Missouri. They had 2 Buddhist monasteries, one in France, one in Nepal, a Catholic monastery in Towson, Maryland. Jewish, they put names of people going through cardiac procedures at Duke in the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. And fundamental Christian, several sites around North Carolina were used. And people who were prayed for did the best in cardiac outcomes. So it gives new meaning to the word, I'll be praying for you, this concept of intercessory prayer. But what really is intercessory prayer? One of my childhood idols was Joe Gibbs, Coach Joe Gibbs. Anybody know who he was? Football coach for the Washington Redskins, now the Commanders. He was, and always will be, I think, a man of God, and he's written several books on his own journey through faith. And he said, I only learned what intercessory prayer was when his own grandson had leukemia. And his prayers turned from, bless this boy, help this boy, to Lord, take me as a substitute for this boy. When we pray like that, there is huge power. And I think the throne of heaven listens to that prayer. But who are we praying to? In Jeremiah it says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. So that's the God who knew us before we were even born, what we were going to be, and how close he wanted us to be to him. Because he can take even an insect like a bumblebee that has no business flying. It has no business flying. You look at the physics of a bumblebee, those tiny little wings should not be able to lift this small bug, or actually a big bug, I should say. But it does. That's, I think, the God we pray to, what he looks like. So turning quickly to walking. How important is walking for anxiety and stress relief? I think it's very important, and here's why. When I say walking, I don't want you to think of expensive gym memberships, because when I talk to my patients, this is what they think of. Oh, he wants me to join a gym. That's not what I want people to do. I want people to simply think walking for 30 minutes a day at a pace of 20-minute miles. So that looks like this. Can you do that? For 30 minutes a day? That is one of the best antidepressants, best anxiolytics, best for health. And my residents always kid me, Dr. Raj, you always walk so fast. Because I'm going to tell you the importance of walking fast as well in just a second. Because physical activity, here's what I hear from patients. I don't have time for that. And so my response is, what fits your busy schedule better? Exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? We can make time for 30 minutes is what I would ask us to do. Because has this been proven to be effective? Yes, and again, I will take you to a study called the SMILE study, which essentially compared walking, physical activity, with one of the best antidepressants out there called Zoloft, sertraline. And over 16 weeks, both were found to be equally effective in treating depression. And I cite this study all the time. And in the 10-month continuation of the study, the 16 weeks were fine and dandy. Both of them worked. But at 10 months, only 10% of people relapsed into depression if they were walking or exercising, and 30% relapsed if they were using a medication. So I'm not saying medications aren't important. Medications can be very important, but so is all the natural stuff that we may be missing out on. Does that make sense? So the consensus recommendation is spend 30 minutes a day doing this. Do something for 30 minutes. And that will add great value, I think, to all of what we're talking about. In fact, this journal article from the Journal of the American Medical Association highlighted it. Anybody here older than 80? Any octogenarians? I see 80. I see a young man saying he's 80. Any octogenarian? Nobody's? Oh, yes, great, excellent. So speed of walking becomes very important as we get older, because if you can walk at a pace of covering 10 yards in 6.5 seconds to be exact, so that's a little bit, so it's if you can walk this fast, kind of like what I demonstrated before, getting 10 yards in 6.5 seconds, your chance of living 10 more years is over 91% if you're a man. Just by that fact alone, if you can walk that fast, your chance of living 10 more years is 91%. Pretty good odds. And if you're a woman, say between 75 and 84, the statistics are interesting. 92% chance of living 10 more years if you're able to do that, and it drops quickly to 80% if you can't. And for men, it dropped from 92% down to 62% chance. If your pace is halted by just a little bit, your longevity goes quickly down. So walk faster is important. And in the interest of time, stress. What does it do to our body? What is cortisol? When we're constantly bombarded by this element called cortisol, this neurohormone in our system, this is what somebody with normal stress looks like. This is fat. It puts weight on in places where we don't want it to be. That's what cortisol does, because it's storing up for when you're going to need that again, when you're stressed, okay? Which is why, unfortunately, an apple a day keeps the doctor away isn't quite true when it comes to your body shape. Pear shape is actually okay. So that old silhouette that was used, that's actually a good thing. We don't want to be round like an apple, because that's where, if we keep it here, that's where more medical problems tend to happen. So if you're pear-shaped naturally, that's actually okay. We're getting away from body mass index, the weight to height ratio as the whole story. We're now looking at things like body shape as dictating health outcomes. Okay? So we want to not have it held here. Here is okay, but not so much here. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, just 2-bit pearls on diet, since it goes along with walking and physical activity. Vegetarianism, has it now been shown and proven to increase life? Yes, it actually has. All types of vegetarianism, even semi-vegetarians, those who mostly eat plants but also occasionally eat meat, had a 12% reduction in mortality as a result of the diet. So we are what we eat, and that also is a de-stressor in our lives. When we and look at the one that was the best, had 19% reduction in death, was pesco-vegetarians. So vegetarians that eat fish. And I think I blew a lot of minds at camp meeting when I said that fish is okay to eat. I had people falling out of their chairs, and I cited Ellen White's own dietary habits on that with eating fish, and she did not consider fish a meat. Okay, and Jesus and his disciples, what did they fish for? Fish, right? If my master ate fish, I think fish is an appropriate protein, and so that's why it's interesting that did the best of all diets, is pesco vegetarians. And we usually say if you are a fish eater, palm-sized portion 3 times a week of a fatty fish with good fats like salmon, since we have it plentiful here in the Northwest, is a good way to go. And a quick word on sodas. I would be remiss if I didn't add this in. Would you eat 22 packets of sugar? Then that's what's in each. I see the kids going, yeah, I would. Yeah, I know. I have 3 of my own. But we want to be very careful about that. And my kids know that it's usually a soda a week, a soda infrequently. It's fine, but not every day. The final pearl I have for you this morning is breathing. This is something that provides anxiety relief, and I want to teach you the right way to do it, because we do this with our cancer patients. Okay? Here is what we do. It's called the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Okay? And that 4-7-8 breathing technique is what I would want you. I practice this when I get nervous or worried or anxious. And just 1 minute of doing this, because oxygen is an anxiety reducer as well. And so how you do it, you breathe in through the nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 7. Out through the mouth for 8. If you have any lung issues, you can reduce that ratio by half, so it can be 2 and 4, or 2, 3, 4, or something like that, if you have any pulmonary conditions. But if you do this, you find yourself wound up, and you're like, wow, and you've prayed, and God, wow, this stress is really getting to me. Just 4 cycles of this, the 4-7-8 breathing technique, is, again, a huge help to even patients going through cancer treatment. And ending your day with the 3 good things exercise. This is something I recently wrote about in one of the medical journals, and something I practice with my own kids. It's ending your day thinking of 3 good things that happened to you that day and the role you played in them. So it can't just be, one of my things was really good today was the weather. It was a perfect 75 and I enjoyed it. No, not enough. It was a beautiful day, and I took a nature walk. Okay? It was a beautiful day, and I took the opportunity to take some savories over to a neighbor. That kind of thing. But if you end your day with that on your mind, it's something called positive psychology, because we really are good as human beings of remembering all the negative stuff that's happened to us. We're naturally adept. And the example I used in this article I wrote was, if you were to stick your hand in a hole and a snake bit you, you will forever remember that. It's in the hippocampus, a deep layer of the brain. You will forever remember that episode, and anytime you pass by a hole in the ground, you will think of that. That's the way our brains work. They code all the bad stuff. But all the good stuff, the I love yous, what a great job, oh, you look great today, all that stuff goes through our brain like pasta water. Right? We don't retain that stuff because it is not protective. But if we are intentional, in Sabbath school discussion today, we kept talking about the importance of choices. Right? Choices, if we're intentional about what we remember to choose to focus on, then I think we set ourselves up for success. So ending your day with 3 good things and the role you played in it by remembering, oh yeah, you know what, my daughter did this amazing thing and we were able to go celebrate it today. That's a great way to end your day. So I'm going to recap real quick for you. starting your day. This is our intervention towards all the anxieties we're facing in 2022. So we want to start our day with prayer and repeat without ceasing, as Jesus himself instructed us, as many times as we need. Get 30 minutes of walking each day. Notice I didn't say exercise, walking as fast as possible. For me, I leave my team behind sometimes in the hospital. And when anxious, stop and do the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Remember that, 4-7-8 breathing technique. And ending your day with the 3 good things exercise, even for just 2 weeks, has been proven to be a reducer of burnout. And a lot of us, burnout is a topic that comes into the workplace all the time, and we want ways that we can reduce that burnout. And I'll close with a little video about our ministry. Divorce is hard. It's one of the most difficult times in someone's life. Divorce, sadly, does not spare any ethnic group, any faith group. Divorce affects people of all walks of life. Divorce is ubiquitous in our society and is affecting everyone. What often gets lost is actually how kids feel, who sometimes don't know where their love and support is going to come from. We as an organization want to make sure that all kids feel supported regardless of where they are in their journey. My name is Dr. Pritham Raj. I'm the president of Dark to Light. The mission of Dark to Light is to bring the healing and support that Jesus Christ himself would have shown to a child going through divorce. Going through the process myself, I could see more clearly the impact it had on my children and other kids who were going through divorce, and I knew that we had to do something about it. When we go through challenging times, we know that God is walking with us. We're not just in this alone. God uses us to help each other, and we want to be part of that mission of God to help other kids go through this process. Even with a token as simple as a stuffed animal, or a book to read with their family, or a dinner to enjoy with their folks. We want that time to be preserved and that time to connect. Everyone knows someone who has been affected by divorce, and we know that each situation is very unique and different. What we're hoping is for you to help us identify any child out there who would need our services and would benefit from prayer and support during this dark time in their life. And we want to make sure that they know that they're going to get through it, that they're being thought of, you're being prayed for, you're being loved. And that's the message we want to send, pure and simple.